Hello, welcome to the first ever Monday night weekend review edition of Celtic Down Under. You may recognise me from the Wednesday show. My name's Sean. I'll be hosting, hopefully, on a regular basis, and joined by our two brand new contributors to Celtic Down Under this evening, who both happen to be from Western Australia, along with myself. So I'm sure we'll find a little bit more about their origin stories right now. Similar to me, may not actually be born and bred here, but let's bounce over to Anthony first of all. Do you want to introduce yourself, Anthony?
Thank you very much, Sean. Pleasure to be here. My name's Anthony Maguire. I came to WA in Australia back in 1990. Some of my fondest childhood memories are watching Celtic play on a Sunday night at a barbecue, Celtic versus Oldco. And a retired footballer myself, gave it away a few years ago. I'm sure you two will probably try and convince me to come back and play vets, but that's a story for another time. And yeah, really looking forward to getting involved. Obviously saw you guys were looking for a few more contributors, did a bit of podcasting back in the past, and yeah, really keen to get going, and a really good game on the weekend to start talking about.
Sounds good. And Paul, what's your story? How did you get here?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So yeah, Paul Massie, originally from deepest, darkest Aberdeenshire. Luckily enough to grow up in a Celtic family. I've been in Perth 10 years now. Kind of came out here 13 or so years ago, backpacking. When ended up back in the UK for a bit, got the opportunity to come back and jumped at it. So yeah, apart from missing friends and family and the hoops, obviously in the flesh. Great choice to come out. But yeah, I'm a season ticket holder for a good number of years. Got the majority of the Martin O'Neill years. I was travelling up from Leeds in Yorkshire back then. So used to the journeys, and maybe not coming all the way from here, but I was lucky enough to get over to Sydney for the recent games, which was good. But yeah, just these days, Celtic TV at all hours of the day and night, and the joys of being and Sky Sports is pretty average coverage. So yeah, delighted to be here. I should give a little shout out to my mate Dave. He has been a longer time listener to the podcast than me, and he gave me a little nudge that you were looking for guys. And suffice to say, I think he probably thinks that I've got plenty to say for myself. So it was potentially a good shout for this. So thanks for having me. Look forward to it.
Thanks, Paul. Now, for just anyone that's listening in another hemisphere, you may not be aware, but Western Australia is very, very hot. And when we come on to do these podcasts, we tend to have to switch off any fans and air conditioning. So if we get a bit more progressively red and sweaty as the show goes, it's not just the excitement about the football. We are just literally boiling alive here, despite it being 8 p.m. at night. I'm guessing you guys same.
I was just trying to say, as sweaty as Douglas Ross trying to run the line on Saturday night, or
yeah, and we're allowed one swear per show, so let's not waste it on Douglas Ross by mentioning what that banner said. Okay, yes, for those of you that didn't see it, it said VAR decision. Douglas Ross is see you next Tuesday, is I think the polite way of saying it. There was a very funny old firm facts tweet today where it was the Partick Thistle fans with a sign that said Douglas Ross is a nincompoop or something along those lines. Very West Endy. So before we get into the kind of minutiae of the game, what was your kind of overall take on it? Paul, first, what did you think? Did you get up, first of all, actually, did you get up at 1:30 or did you watch it in the morning?
Yeah, I got up. I always get up. I pretty much can't face the
get a job, Paul.
I just end up like I go to bed early. I get up, so I was in bed at like 9, 10, 3 hours up, and then another 3 hours, and then up, gym, work. So yeah, always a bit tired after those ones. The 5:30s are probably the worst for us here in WA. Look, all comments aside about that, I actually really enjoyed the game. It's nice to see somebody come to our place and actually try and put up a bit of a fight. It's a cup tie, so I guess nothing to lose. A bit of the pressure off from the league. Nobody's expecting anything of them. But yeah, they said obviously they're not going to match us play for play, but they did kind of match us up and try and press us high in the pitch. They stuck Gogic on Kalmak, and that kind of worked for them for a long part of the game. He was by no means as instrumental as you would typically expect him to be. And I definitely thought like somebody like Greg Taylor had to really step up and into midfield and be that extra man, which we've seen him do that a few times when the other lot tried to do a bit of a high pressing game against us at Ibrox. Taylor was key to that. I think that's one of the reasons we struggled in that match, is because he obviously got injured and had to go off, and JJ was a bit of a shambles, really out of position and just back from World Cup. So I think Taylor really stepped up. But it was, like I say, I think it was nice to see the buddies have a crack. I think obviously the turning point is the penalty, and ultimately the red card, which I'm sure we'll get into in a bit. But I feel like they probably would have tired anyway, because if they play that high pressing game for that length of time, eventually that's going to take its toll. And the class that we've got and just the ruthlessness obviously showed through. So I thought 5-1, whilst we were deserving of that in terms of our kind of ruthless finishing, was probably a bit harsh on them in terms of coming out and actually trying to have a go. But yeah, I think we all get fed up of the low block and 11 behind the ball. So I think when we've got to struggle for 65, 70 minutes to break that through, I think we should be pleased that that's a bit more of a different test, and it will stand us in good stead for the game coming up in the next couple of weeks, I would say.
Yeah, they've been getting a lot of praise for that, because as Giakoumakis said in his press conference, teams do just sit in and have the low block, but St Mirren do tend to, certainly in recent games this season anyway, tend to be a bit more of a hard high press. And I don't even think that's a St Mirren thing so much as a Stephen Robinson thing, because Motherwell used to do kind of the same back in the day. But what they would tend to, and what happened in the game where we lost 2-0 was when they had that 2-goal lead, maybe after an hour or so, they did kind of drop into the low block at that point. But you're right, as their fitness levels were good, their tactics were good. And I think it kind of told after 75 minutes. How did you see it, Anthony?
Yeah, just sort of reiterate what yourself and Paul just said. They definitely did start with the high press and high intensity, but I think you're right, around that 60, 70 minute mark, they did sort of die a bit, and we sort of made our substitutes. Hatate, O'Reilly, really, we kicked up a gear, so we actually finished the game like an absolute freight train. And that's the risk reward of doing a high press against Celtic, is that if you can jag a goal early and you've got something to hold on to, then the belief's there and you can keep going. But they were 1-0 down, and then the penalty, and it was a penalty, but it was a penalty and a red card, and 2-0, that sort of sucks the life out of you if you're sort of dying on your feet by that point. And then we found the goals later on, sort of thing, made it, put the icing on the cake. So I think, like you say, entertaining game, good cup tie, played in good intensity, again, the two teams having to go at each other. But the risk reward there is that you can end up getting scalped against Celtic if you do tire in those end stages where you see where teams in the league will go there and try and sit in and maybe go away with a 1-0, 2-0 loss, not expending much energy. But St Mirren definitely left it all on the park. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah, on the red card that you both talked about for a little bit there, we can kind of merge that in, I guess, with the kind of VAR and how long that took. It's just it seems to be every week, like pick your incident, which is going to make VAR look bad this week. And I'd be thinking that there's enough said about that already, to be honest, but we can touch on it a little bit. But on the actual the penalty incident, I think when you watch it back, both players handball it. So I'm not like, when they're rewatching it over and over, I think maybe it's because, I think when you guys mentioned it on the side chat, the camera is not good. Like I think it's maybe a 30 FPS shot or something, and they're trying to slow it down.
Is it a Viaplay versus Sky thing? Like, is it they've just got like worse cameras on the grounds? Because all the replays for all the games this weekend have been terrible. Like, they're so grainy and it's missing frames. Like, it's like, I understand how the referee took so long to look at some of them because the quality was terrible. Sorry to interrupt you there, Sean, but
no, it's right.
Yeah, it was just. I think it comes back to this double jeopardy thing for me, and I thought they tried to eliminate that from football, where you concede a penalty and you get a red card. It's a double whammy, and I think they need to, with the number of handballs now being given because of VAR, I think they're really going to have to look at this rule in the off season, because that's harsh. Yes, it was a handball, but would a yellow card have sufficed? You know what I mean? Like, it was point blank range as well. It wasn't as if like you had a lot of time to sort of react. So I don't know. I felt sort of a bit. If I was St Mirren support, I'd be feeling pretty aggrieved. But like I say, the number of handball, penalty, VAR calls. I mean, I'm lost now. I can't. I watch one and go, is that a penalty? Is it not a penalty? Like, the rule needs looked at, and again, then you've got the referee interpreting it. You've got the VAR referee interpreting it. Then you've got the referee re-refereeing it. I mean, it's madness, and it's just sucking life at the game for me sometimes. Some of them I'm just scratching my head going like, how's that that penalty? That Bernabei one way back when, that one for me is still the one that I'm still, and there's obviously one of the Rangers ones later on that we'll get to, but yeah, for me, it's just, it's a shambles.
I was going to say that's how ridiculous the handball situation's got, that they're even giving penalties against Sevco at Ibrox now. That's how bad it's got. We're this sordid state of affairs we've got to, that they can't even avoid giving penalties against Sevco at Ibrox. What is the world coming to? That guy's going to get kicked out his lodge down there. Paul, what was your take on the Taylor sending off?
So, yeah, look, I think similar to Anthony, I think that you can give the ref a little bit of slack for the time they take. I was in originally, and look, all decisions took too long, and it's a constant thing that they take too long. And I think, without labouring the point too much, and we've talked about other sports, and we'll maybe touch on a great result for Scotland right at the end. But the rugby unions had it for years. Fair enough, they're much further along. But the two things they do really, really well is they've got the refs mic'd up. They explain every decision. Viewers can hear it at home. It's up on the big screen. They're looking at it. The ref is literally being chatted to so they never leave the pitch. It's up on the big screen in the stadium. Okay, not all our stadiums have got that, so maybe some of the smaller stadiums that's still going to be the case. But we've got the big screens. It could be up there. They could be literally looking up there, chatting to the VAR. That could be mic'd up. That could be coming through the tannoy. Certainly could be everyone at home, and you'd have a clear idea of exactly what was going on. So going back to this one, I think you're right. It does hit both hands. I think the second hand it hits, you can't give that. It's a deflection off the first hand, and it hits him, and his hand's in a natural position by the side of it, down by his side. But the first one, there's not a great view on that, and they look at it from a few different angles, and eventually find one where you pretty much, if you join the dots between the few angles you've seen, you can go, yeah, well, his arm's out to the side. He is unnaturally making himself bigger. It does hit him clearly on that. Well, you think you can get it clear from the few different angles. You go, well, yeah, it's probably hit him right in the forearm, and it is away from his body. And again, you still can't 100% say, but I'm pretty sure that's going in without hitting him. Like Abada's hit a decent strike towards goal, and he's really the only person in the way at that time on the direction he's headed. So it's 100% a penalty. I don't think because I thought, why is he taking so long? But ultimately, then he flashes the red card, and because I'm the same as you, Anthony. I think, well, it's a penalty and it's a yellow, and we're moving on, and it's done. But then they've obviously had a chat, which we can't hear, and they've probably been tossing up: is it a yellow? Is it a red? And I guess if you're saying you're stopping a goal scoring opportunity with a handball, then probably by the letter of the law. And I've looked up a few today, but for other things, and I haven't looked up the specifics of that, because the handball, like you say, it just bamboozles me at the moment. Especially in terms of a lot of it comes out in interpretation, doesn't it? But yeah, so if he's judged that to be guaranteed goal scoring opportunity, then he's probably got to walk. But I agree with you, Anthony, that needs reviewed. And to me, it comes back to a deliberate handball at that point. So we've seen ones down the years. I was lucky enough to be I think I was in the ground the day that Carlos Queller palmed one over the bar, and then we missed the penalty. And we still managed to win that match. So to me, that's a deliberate attempt to save the ball. You can walk for that. That's pretty clear cut. But when you're sliding to try and block a challenge, and your arm sort of gets out in the way, albeit you're making yourself bigger, it's probably a natural position for your body to fly with momentum. I think it's a little bit harsh that you get a red card for that.
The only other thing I want to say on VAR, because I'm fed up hearing about it, talking about it, whatever, but the only thing I'd say is that there was only 2 games this weekend that had VAR in effect. It was the Celtic game and the Sevco game. So how do we feel from a sport and integrity point of view around that? Because I realise they don't have the lower league teams don't have the money to do it, and Livingston chose not to do it, even though they are they're in the top division. Are we all right with that? Should it be the same for everybody? Or, I mean, what's the answer there for that?
Well, I think it is fair, because you've already got a division between Premiership and Championship. So what's the difference really when you're in the Scottish Cup,
Yeah.
I think it's a bit of a farce, to be honest. Like you're. How can you? It's not an even playing field, is it? Like, in one of those smaller games that VAR's either not an option, or if they've opted out of it, I've not got too much sympathy for them, other than maybe the team that hasn't opted out not getting the benefit. If it's one of those smaller matches, then if a ref gets an absolute shock, and look, let's be honest, you could get a shocker wrong, and then you might not get it on VAR. But if we make an assumption that VAR gets most things right when they have a second look, which is a bit of a leap in the current environment, but if we make that assumption, then there's you move forward from there and say there could be a big mistake in a game by a referee, or just a miss, just a genuine miss. Can't be everywhere at the same time, and a team potentially goes out of the cup on that. So I guess that one-off opportunity on games is probably a bigger impact on a cup game than just as you move through the league.
One of our commenters, Anthony's, chimed in with what you're saying about fairness, and he's mentioning that the levels of incompetence from Andrew Reid, having varying levels of competence from referees is probably not fair either, which I think is a bigger issue around the question of whether we should have full-time refs or not. And I personally think that would make a bigger difference in VAR. And on the subject of the red card itself, Mahesh and Peter have both mentioned that technically the rule is that is a red card, which 100% that is what the rule says, and whether we think that's right or not is a completely different matter. I'd like to kind of move on a little bit to talk about Celtic and the performance just for a moment, if that's okay. The part that kind of, there's a few things. So let's start with a couple of negatives out of the way. Okay, so we can talk about the kind of, after last week's game, the chat was Rio Tatis had a bad game against St Johnstone. David Turnbull's came off the bench and scored again. It was a pretty clear shout for Turnbull getting his chance, and he got his chance. And I think he'll be disappointed. I think most people that watch him were disappointed in Turnbull's performance. And to compound that for David Turnbull, Rio Hatate came off the bench and was absolutely electric and scored a goal that, it was 5-1 in injury time. But if that goal he scores is a 1-0 winner in a cup semi-final, you're talking about it for 20, 30 years on. But that was an absolutely sensational goal. And Hatate really showed why he's in there ahead of Turnbull on a more regular basis. What did you make of those two, Anthony?
So basically, I said last week I thought Turnbull might get a run against St Johnstone, and they didn't make that change then. So I kind of felt it was coming, because Ange has got to try and balance the squad out to a certain degree. And unfortunately for Ange, we're only playing one game a week at the moment, so the tendency is always to pick your strongest 11. So you say that at the moment David Turnbull's not in that. So David Turnbull's in this unfortunate situation where he's not been playing much. He's getting minutes here off the bench, but he has to come in and absolutely hit the ground running, because he knows if he doesn't, Rio Hatate, not going to have two bad games in a row, and he's come on and had an absolute stormer. 2 points I want to make is that I think Paul mentioned earlier about McGregor being man-marked a lot, and that to me is, well, if there's somebody sucked into Mark McGregor, then what's Turnbull doing? Why is he not picking up space and being free and being that triangle and that outball? Like, he just wasn't at the races there for me. And the difference here as well is that in previous weeks when Turnbull's come off the bench, yes, he's popped up with a goal, but he's laboured a bit and he's not really dominated when he's come off the bench. Whereas Hatate, wow, like he came off the bench, all right, Simone retired, and I've said that already, but he really grabbed it in by the scruff of the neck and really drove it forward, and he was involved. The pass for his goal, he knocked it out to Abada, and Abada knocked it back in. A couple of other goals, he was involved with the passage of play leading up to the goals, particularly the one for O, which we'll touch on. But for me, David Turnbull's blown a bit of a chance there. And I think we've been talking in the group chat that his contract's only 12 months at the end of the season. He's going to have to start putting some performances in. And it's tough because he's not had a lot of football, and it's hard. But this is unfortunately what it's like playing for Celtic. You've just got to come straight off the bench and straight in and perform. Otherwise, it's sink or swim, cutthroat.
Yep. What do you reckon, Paul? Is Turnbull going to turn it around? Is he going to be out of the club at some point?
I think he's probably going. Like, look, the fact he's still there now suggests that there's either a mixture of Ange hasn't got in quite the mix that he wants, which is obviously quite hard to do in January, even though he's done some great business at this time of year. So and he sees him every day in training. So, you maybe say that he's got a chance, but I think he's done. I think with a year left on his contract, he probably hasn't shown enough to show that there's further investment sort of worth doing. And like, yeah, I wouldn't have started him. To be honest, I'd have stuck with either Hatate or O'Reilly. I think, on their day, they're our best two in those positions. Moy's obviously on a great run at the minute. And I definitely think if it's Moy, he needs Hatate next to him. I think Hatate is the best option we've got in those eights, for want of a better phrase. But yeah, Turnbull, you're right. If McGregor, why am I talking about Greg Taylor driving into the midfield and being the extra man and being a bit of extra creation in there when Calmac gets a bit squeezed? And you're right. Why is it not Turnbull? So I think he's tailor-made for coming on for the last 15-20 minutes. Teams are tired. They've run their race. And, we know he can strike a good ball from outside the area, and he's picked up quite a lot of goals. And I think on that basis, people have put 2 and 2 together and got 5 as far as I'm concerned, because he's, on the times he started, he hasn't really shown the levels that the other 3 have. And yeah, Moy took a little bit of time to get up and running, but it seems understandable given how little football he played prior to that. But once he's got himself up to speed and coming off a really good World Cup, we can see the benefit we've had of him in there. So, and we talked about this in the side chat. I think Taylor's time's up. Turnbull's time's up. We get what we can get for him with a year left on his contract this summer, and we look to add another midfielder. If Tomoki's potentially going to challenge Cal, and Cal can push up to 8 as well. But then we probably need another, all-rounder that can either swap into that position or do we have an out-and-out 8 that replaces Taylor? So you probably want 2 for every position. And if you do want that, then I think we're probably best to sort of rotate that through. And given Ange's record in the transfer market, you'd probably back him to find somebody at least even money for what you get for Turnbull going out, or potentially you maybe even make a little tiny profit on one of his little signings from overseas and that fill a hole. So yeah, that's my view. I think Turnbull is done.
A couple of counterpoints there. You mentioned Moy, so is it maybe the case that also because Moy had a poor game as well, and certainly his poorest since the new year, I think, is it maybe just that St Mirren had a good system for negating our 2 number 10s that are usually more influential in a game? And in terms of the kind of squad dynamic, what's going to happen if, say, Rio Hatate leaves for 20 million in the summer and we've got Turnbull ticking down his contract? That kind of leaves double hole in the squad in that sense.
And a big chunk of cash to invest in it, though.
Fair. But then you've also seen anytime a player comes in, Ange is generally, Alistair Johnson aside, he's generally reluctant to put someone in straight away. He likes them to learn the system. We can talk about Kyogo's injury just now, but when he went off, he doesn't bring on O, he brings on Abada. So I think there is a certain thing about Ange trusting players. And I know last year he was, out of necessity, bringing Kyogo and Starfelt off the plane and putting them on the pitch, but this year he's got more of a luxury that he doesn't really have to do that. Yeah.
And look, that's a fair point. Sorry to interrupt. That's a fair point. But I guess if we're doing it in the summer, we've got a bit more time to bed them in over that period. So if you think about Hatate, again, there was a bit of requirement there because we're down to bare bones when those boys joined in January, but he pretty much came in and hit the ground running. So I guess if we do need to add more than one, be it 2, then you kind of put your trust in Ange to find somebody that can hit the ground running at that point in time. I do think Moy's obviously not the quickest and most mobile, but he's super quick up top and he's really technical. So he sort of makes up for his sort of pace and mobility side of things. Whereas Hatate is obviously a bit more all action. And I think Turnbull can be a bit languid as well. So maybe they're just not a great combo together.
Mm-hmm. Just on the Anthony, I'll chuck it to you in a second. Yep. On the Kyogo injury, there's just a lot of dynamics around that to take in. There's one, Maeda goes up front when Kyogo gets injured, so that's one thing. O comes off the bench later, opens his scoring first goal for Celtic. we've also got that Giakoumakis just this week signed for another team. And we were all saying before he left, well, it's fine, he can go, but what if Kyogo gets injured? And then the next game, Kyogo gets injured. So the fourth thing that I would say to consider when assessing this whole situation is when Kyogo injured that same shoulder earlier in the season, I don't believe he missed a game. I think he was back for the next game. Anthony, is that right? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, I think at the most, I don't know if we had a midweek game that he maybe missed, and then he was back for the following weekend, maybe. But it is a concern. This was the doomsday scenario for us at the moment, is if Kyogo gets injured. So he's really the one player that we don't have an out-and-out replacement for at this moment in time, and just trying to build up. He said so. He says, look, the sports scientists are saying you drip feed him, get him in like bit by bit by bit. So he's definitely not ready to start as yet. So obviously that's why he went with Maeda down the middle and Abada out wide. And within 2 minutes we scored. So, and Maeda did actually really, really well to score that goal. I mean, the ball from Abada into Moy was a brilliant ball in. Moy actually got the wrong side of the defender. It was probably the one defensive error that St Mirren made that half. And we capitalized on it, and Maeda made a very good run across the defender to put the ball in the back of the net, and any sort of doubts, questions around his touch and finish, like he buried that one. It was a really, really well worked goal. So yeah, there was a bit of I was like, oh no, when Kyogo went off, I'm going, oh, this is a nightmare, because like, you know, big Giakoumakis is just on the plane away to America. So I think if we were in Europe, I think if we were playing twice a week, I don't think Gigi was on that plane. I think he was staying till the summer. But I think, and just thinking, O's in the building, we're playing one game a week. Worst case scenario, Maeda can slot in there, Haskabanovic can sort of work something out in there. So I think we'll get by this time, but it is just a reminder that at the moment, you know, certain positions are still, we say we've got two players for a position, but I think up top, centre forward position is that one position where we are vulnerable. Flip side to that, I love his first touch, his close control, absolutely craps all over Giakoumakis. Like, he just seems to be able to, the ball just sticks to him like glue. He drew that foul for for Considine against St Johnson. Drew the foul and the red card there. He's one touch goal. I mean, that's a poacher's instinct right there. So if he can give us everything that GG gave us, on top of that, better close control, I think we're onto a winner. The early days, I know, but I just think that, yeah, definitely one. And he's probably got one of the best chants for a Celtic player in a very long time.
Go on, Anthony.
No, I can't sing, so I'm definitely not going to do that.
No, is there nobody going to sing it?
I'm not going to do that.
Was it? That song.
That's the one. That's the one. Yep.
I don't even know the name of the song. What's the?
Not Seven Nation Army.
It's
the white flags. White
stripes.
I thought it was original. That's not original. Okay. So Paul, what do you reckon? Make it a striker situation. Does Maeda start up front against Aberdeen, or do we rest Kyogo? Does O get his chance? What do you think?
Yeah, look, it's funnily enough. Obviously, you worry about Kyogo being injured long term, but in a funny kind of way, you wouldn't start with the three in that position unless you were forced to. You'd always start with Kyogo. But with them off, it actually allowed Jota to play in his preferred position. Abada has had not the most game time lately, and previously has been on fire for us. And again, like, you wouldn't say he has had his best game or his best, but he's had two key contributions, right? He plays that great pass down the line we've just touched on, and then he's the one sneaking in at the back post, or ghosting in at the back post, if you like, fit by tweets like me. He's turning in and he's hitting the shot, and he's getting a penalty and a red card for it. So a lot of fans have been frustrated with Abada over his period, because he's a bit of an enigma. So, a lot of times you don't see much from him. He's not really in the game completely. His first touch sometimes isn't the greatest, but he can pop out of nowhere and score goals, as Barisic, amongst others, knows to his cost more than once. So I think he's a player, and this is I think one of our biggest challenges isn't everyone else. It's Ange balancing the squad, and I know he's on record more than once saying it's not his job to keep players happy. He's not going to go and take flowers to their wives and stuff like that. Some of the quotes have been brilliant lately. But there is a broader point to that. And I take his point, right? It's up to players to force themselves into the plan and become a pick and get game time that they hopefully are comfortable with. But there's always going to be players that want to play in a side like ours and want to win trophies and want to get into the Champions League. And then there are going to be others that go, well, I'd rather play 90 minutes every week or close to it and potentially go and do that in a smaller stadium and maybe at a better league in theory and get paid more money. So I think that is a challenge. And as Celtic fans, we're always quick to go, well, you play in front of 60,000, you win trophies, you're in the Champions League, or you should be most seasons. Where else would you want to go? Because we don't want to be anywhere else. But if you're a player with a relatively short career, you are going to weigh up things like wages and game time. I saw, and this is a little bit off topic, but I saw Alan Shearer was saying that Harry Kane's records are his medals, which I think only somebody like Alan Shearer, who didn't win any medals, could come out with a quote like that. But I found that a bit of a strange one. But it is a point that not every player is going to be as invested in Celtic as we all are. So, but back to the striking lineup, I think Miera, with his work rate, is going to cause. He's not as deft, and his finishing is probably not quite as good as Kyogo's, but his work rate alone will terrify defences. And getting that balance on the wide positions potentially makes up for the miss of Kyogo a lot of the time. So I'm not too concerned. But yeah, if Kyogo's 100% fit, I'd play him in the next match. If there's any sort of slight doubt, I'd wrap him in cotton wool for the cup final and take your pick. Haksabanovic, if he's showing it in training, could do with a run. But if we went with the three that finished, I'd be quite happy with that too.
I know you were mentioning the wingers there, and Abada I thought was sensational for the first two goals. That through ball for the first one, and then he's basically should have scored the second one if not for defenders chucking their arms out. But on the opposite wing, you're talking about Jota being on his preferred side, and Jota got some rough treatment at the weekend. At one point, he showed his ripped sock to the referee, who just kind of shrugged. And we were getting, and that's why Kyogo went off injured as well. He got fouled and was no free kick given. I thought the ref was kind of letting a few slide that shouldn't have been sliding. One thing after what's happened with Turnbull and Hatate, which has started a fire in the comments at the moment between Mahesh, who's backing up Turnbull with stats, and everyone else is just saying we just prefer the look of Hatate, which is fair and valid. And a lot of comments from Strangelove that we can't really put up because he's talking about Douglas Ross in an explicit manner. But yeah, on the subject of Jota, and based on what's happened with Turnbull and Hatate this week, I would be interested to see Jota bench for the Aberdeen game and bring in maybe Haksabanovic, just so I can see Jota come back in with a point to prove in the cup final.
Jota's a bit of a tricky one at the moment because he is more of a left winger than a right winger. Maeda has to play on the left. But I guess the question here is, if Maeda plays down the middle against Aberdeen, then you would have Jota on the left and then Abada or another on the right. I think it's one of those ones, it's a balancing act, and it's like, well, is your best team with Maeda on fire at the moment, having him on the left and his work rate, and having sacrificed that by having Jota on the right? Or do you say, actually, Jota, sorry, but Maeda's keeping you out your position, by play Abada? But to be fair, that's Abada's first real decent performance in a little while as well. So it's hot and cold. O'Reilly's been cold. I think Abada up until the weekend's been cold. Jota's actually starting to warm up again. I thought he'd had a couple of good games in the lead up to the one on the weekend. And I think that's, again, this comes back to this Ange thing. It's like keeping the engine running. It's just finding the right balance, the right mix, trying to keep everyone ticking along so that he can make a change and that player comes in and contributes. And that's where Turnbull didn't do that. But it's not so much keeping people happy so much as keeping the squad rotated around enough so that if he needs to call on someone, they're ready to go. And part of that is game time. And it's hard. As I say, we're only playing one game a week at the moment. So it doesn't really necessarily answer your question there, Sean, but it's the best that I can do at the moment.
Yeah, I guess the question was, do we think Jota is going to rip it up in the cup final? Is he? Yeah, I guess you kind of touched on it with the form. Paul, Jota, what do you reckon?
Yeah,
more to come.
I agree. Yeah, there is more to come. I agree with Anthony. The last couple of weeks, he's looked on a game where the flicks and tricks have been out, and he's been unplayable at times. He obviously took some rough treatment, as quite a few of our players did. And look, I guess that's the flip with St Mirren. Yeah, they've got a fair amount of work in, and some other players, Sean actually, but in amongst that, there was some pretty heavy challenges that were allowed to go. And once you let a few go, then you usually get a few more. And I guess the refs want to keep their yellow cards in their pockets so that it doesn't get out of hand. But then equally, then sort of you let a few things go, and players don't get the protection that they deserve. Yeah, he definitely got caught. There was a massive hole in his sock. But yeah, look, I think it is that balancing act, because one of the things we touched on there, if you think about it, is because players are blowing hot and cold, or coming up to a game, or maybe might be off it for a game. That's the benefit of the squad that we've got, and the size of the squad and the depth of the squad. And I agree. Yep, look, potentially isn't as fully has the depth that we maybe would want or think, but comparatively to everybody else we're up against, it definitely has. And we're in the fortunate position that if somebody isn't quite on it for a given game, then we can usually rotate somebody else in that is going to increase the tempo and bring in a performance. And we saw that again today. Turnbull didn't play, or in that game at the weekend, Turnbull didn't play great, and Hatate and O'Reilly both desperate to get involved and play well. Abada the same. So yeah, look, I think you want obviously your best, in theory, your best players playing and at the top of the game in each match. But I think we should probably acknowledge that isn't always going to happen, but we're lucky we've got the depth that we have. I saw a question earlier, or a comment earlier on, is 5 subs fair? I was like,
yeah,
everyone agreed to it, so
yeah, and it's definitely an advantage for the clubs with more money and bigger squads. Of course, it is, but it's certainly to our advantage if the odd player isn't having their best game, because you can bring in somebody else, and just on an ongoing basis, you've got that pressure in the squad, knowing that there's not many players in that squad currently that maybe CCV and one or two others, Cal, Greg Taylor. There's not too many that are guaranteed a shot. Most of them, there's a little bit of pressure on them. If they don't really play, then somebody else will want to take that shot from them.
Yeah, with the score of 5-1, and when you see your centre back gets man of the match in a game where you've won 5-1, you've not kept the clean sheet. You've scored 5 goals, and your centre back gets man of the match. You're like, right, what kind of happened in this game? So let's parse that out. Why was Carter Vickers the man of the match? So obviously he's the one that he blocks was a unbelievable block, because most of the time when somebody's opening up to take a shot, that any defender in the world is going to go to block the ball. But what Carter Vickers does instead is he puts his body in the spot that Joe Hart can't cover. And Joe Hart, I don't think, is getting that. And he's blocked it over the crossbar with that. So, yeah, but that one thing, is that why he got man of the match? Was it just because he's imperious throughout? What do you reckon, Anthony?
Well, funny you should say that block, because the week before when St Johnstone scored, he did actually try and put the block in, and it just seemed to swerve around him. I don't know how it happened, but it sort of swerved around him. So he was nearly on for the block there as well. So he does it really, really well. And you're right, I think Joe Hart would have been struggling to get to that one. There's a couple of times just where sort of slack back passes and things like that, where he really had to sort of put a sliding challenge in and really sort of put himself about. A couple of good tackles, I recall, and a couple of good headers and things as well. So just CCV being CCV, but it was probably just a little bit above his usual best, which is saying something. I think the back four actually played really well. They actually had to deal with a bit of Curtis Main made a nuisance of himself. I think CCV really handled him. I think that's the first time I've seen a Celtic centre defender really battle a big centre forward and really come off best sort of thing, because Boyatas and players that years gone by, Iron, that they sometimes got bullied quite a lot, and Julian to extent sometimes as well. So I think he really, and he's not that tall. He's actually only sort of 5'11", 6 foot. He's not tall for a defender, so he really does put himself about. So I think well deserved. One concern with Starfelt, I think Starfelt gets a lot of pelters from the Celtic supporters. I think he is actually a very good defender, and I think he does a lot of the dirty work and really sort of shores things up. And the partnership between him and CCV can't be underestimated. But that is the second time he's been caught for a penalty like that with a blindside run, and he needs to work on that. He needs to be more aware of what's around him. Because just holding your hands up going, oh no, I've given away a penalty. Well, thankfully it didn't matter on the weekend, but if that's against Sevco in a couple of weeks in a cup final, that could be very costly. So he's just going to have his wits about him at all times. But that, I just hope that's not a pattern, because twice doesn't make it a pattern. But for me, that was a concern. Lastly, Johnson and Taylor were solid. I think Johnson's slowly getting into the whole inverted fullback thing. I think some of his passing still a little bit limited at times, but defensively he's sound. He loves a tackle. He really gets stuck in, so there's no problem with his work ethic there. Taylor was back into sort of some of his better form. Like he's when he got that injury, he was probably out of it for a couple of weeks, but he's sort of back on track now. So back four was good, but I just like to say that's that one concern over Starfelt for that penalty. But yeah,
everyone that listens to this show knows how I feel about Starfelt, and I'll be fully objective about it. The penalty that he gives away and the one against Hearts you're talking about, it doesn't happen if he's left-footed. The problem is he's leading with his right foot. Both of those were coming in on the right-hand wing. So he's led with the wrong foot, and that's why the strikers come across it. And there was at one point about, I'd put in my notes, 23 minutes in, where it was absolutely painful because Carter Vickers plays the ball across them. It's just a little bit away from him, but he has to take like 3 touches and turn the long way around to get the ball at his feet to play a pass. Whereas if that's Kobayashi, it's already on his left foot and it's out wide to Greg Taylor. So I want Starfelt in the team for the rest of the season, because I don't think you change a centre back pairing at this point of the season. But for next season, I want to see Kobayashi in there. Paul?
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. It's because he's playing out of position, right? He's on the odd occasion where he's covered when Carter Vickers hasn't played, which I think might only be once or twice. He's played on the right, and he actually looks much more comfortable because he's naturally he's not particularly both-footed. He's making a fist of it with the left, but he regularly looks uncomfortable trying to play that pass out to Taylor or whoever else is dropping deep, Jota or whoever else. So yeah, you're spot on. It's because he's still not a natural left-sided defender. He is the best option we've got there, and we've tried a few. He's seen off Welsh, he's seen off Jens. Kobayashi's clearly not ready, although he has looked tidy enough on the shot on a few little occasions we've seen him. You're right, he does the dirty work. He wins his headers, he puts blocks in. But he does just have that the odd lapse, and it's absolutely because he's playing out of position. And I think they'll target him. They'll target him in the cup final, and we just hope that we've got enough about us going in the other direction that we're giving them more headaches than that. But I think a bit like playing in goals for Celtic, playing in the centre back is a bit of a thankless task because you're not really asked to do very much, other than Ange's asking you to play out a lot, but you're not actually asked to do that much defending. So that you've got a bit like a keeper who doesn't do very much for 95 minutes and needs to pull out a save later on. You've got to have that sharpness throughout the period, and he's just shown a couple of little lapses. But yeah, I think he's very much still our first pick there. And if you look at the record, and again, we can overestimate stats, but they're becoming more into the game because it's for a good reason. The record of them, I don't think have they lost a game as a partnership. I don't think
not domestically.
Domestically, yeah.
And I don't think they played together in the Champions League this year. I don't think, because Jens played every game, so I'd say not in the Champions League this year.
Yeah.
Don't know about last year, but yeah, certainly not. Okay, so we've covered literally every position in the team, which was not really the intention, but it just kind of came out naturally. We can quickly touch, as it was Cup weekend, obviously the other results are going to affect who we could be getting in the next round, so we'll just have a quick run through of some of the other goings on. Sevco in the Glasgow derby. What would you say? Partick Thistle is the third biggest team in Glasgow now, just behind Queen's Park. Not sure how you measure it. If you're going with history and age. But yeah, Sevco conceded their first domestic penalty in 390 days. So last January was the last time they conceded a penalty, which is interesting. And then I don't know how much you guys seen of this cheat goal, and then letting Partick Thistle score a goal. It was quite a situation, to be honest. For anyone that's not seen it, Malik Tillman's down in the grounds pretending he's injured, and Sevco put the ball out. Partick Thistle go to give them it back, but Mallet Tillman, who was suddenly not injured anymore, instead of letting the guy kick the ball back, takes it off him, gets one-on-one with the keeper and goes around him and scores. So whole melee ensues. Mallet Tillman got knocked over, all sorts of stuff going on. And in the end, Thistle get allowed to walk up and score with everyone on board except for maybe Alan McGregor, who tries to block it and then changes his mind and lets the guy score. A bit of a weird going on. I mean, where do you stand on this? As should the referee do something? Was it the right thing that happened? Where does sportsmanship and rules clash on this one? Anthony, what do you reckon?
To coin a phrase from a BBC reporter, it was bonkers, because that was just some of the most mental footage you've ever seen in your life. So Tillman's obviously, I don't know if he didn't know, but he did turn around and look at the referee, and the referee can't blow for anything because technically no rules have been broken. It's a sportsmanship thing. He's just carried on going, well, I'm going to score here. This was to put Rangers 2-1 up, by the way. They were 1-0 down, so they conceded a penalty early and managed to get one back. So this was to put them in front. So it wasn't like it was 3-4-0 and they were cruising. They needed to score. So then they sort of went up the park. It was decided that Partick would be allowed to go back up the park and score, and Alan Mirren making an absolute tit of himself, getting in the way. The fans are booing. So they're booing sportsmanship. I don't know. Yeah. Apparently everyone on Twitter thinks there was nothing wrong with Tillman's goal, and I'm thinking, yes, I'm wrong. But admittedly, the Partick Thistle boy took a heavy touch, a heavy touch. However, he was not expecting someone to be buzzing right up his backside to take the ball off him. So it's just one of those things. I mean, you think of the one with Ireland and France and Thierry Henry and stuff like that. It's just one of these things. I think the right decision was made and it balanced it out, and there's no controversy there. Rangers end up winning 3-2 just, which seems to be their MO at the moment. It seems to be winning by a goal just. So I don't know how much longer that's going to go on for. And some of the Sevco fans are already starting to bay for Beale's blood. So, we'll see what happens there. But they've managed to scrape through to the next round. But yeah, it's just bonkers.
Yeah, I think that sums it up. And obviously there was a few other moments in the match as well. Paul, I don't know if you've seen, there was the penalty, which was, I actually thought it was technically correct, but some people are arguing that because the contact started outside the box, the rule is if it carries on into the box. So they did get their penalty. And then the Jags goalkeeper just stood up to it, which was interesting as well. But then there was one that was not widely shown, which was, I think it was Mallet Tillman, this rugby tackle on a guy off the ball. And it was in the box as well. Just nothing, no VAR review, nothing. Don't know if you've seen either of them.
First 2 minutes of the game, yeah.
Was it?
I've seen it in a snapshot. I didn't know it was at that point in the game, Anthony, which is probably why it wasn't looked at or picked up. Basically a side suplex, as far as I can tell, in the inside the corner of just inside the top corner of the box. So yeah, I think if we go back, we've all exhausted ourselves on VAR, but I think the overarching thing that most people, fair-minded fans want from VAR and from referees, even before we had VAR, is consistency. And there's clearly an incident there worth looking at, but the referees missed it. Fair enough. We said before, sometimes they've not got the best view. They can't see everything. They don't have eyes in the back of their head. I can't remember exactly where the ref was stood on this one, but that's what VAR's for, right? That the VAR's got the time to quickly have a look. And if we touch on rugby, one of the great things about rugby is that their VAR has done a bunch of the looking long before the ref ever gets round to having to review it, and is actually saying to the ref, and a perfect example from the Scotland game at the weekend, the ref goes, held up, no try, and the VAR goes, I've got another angle for you. And he shows the other angle, and there's clearly contact with the ball on the deck. He gives the try immediately. So I just think VAR isn't doing enough in terms of, and it isn't VAR, it's a bloke in a studio that isn't doing enough to review the footage. And I don't know whether that's just pig-headedness or poor quality, or they haven't got the tech quick enough. There's a lot we don't know about what's going on here, and there's constantly this chat about investment. But I think we should be better at this. And I think there's also been some public chat about, do we have VAR specific referees that that aren't necessarily, maybe they're ex-referees. They're not fit enough to run around football parks anymore in the professional game, but they've got a ton of experience now. Maybe not Scottish refs, because we've seen Stuart Dougal guarantee us that it was definitely something, and it gets overturned on it. It's definitely a red card and it's overturned on appeal. So, I don't know what the answer is in Scotland, but realistically, that we need to get better at VAR and we need to be quick. I guess the flip of that is you look down south and they're still having debacles every single week, and they've had it longer than us, and they've got unlimited money. So I don't know what that tells you.
Yeah, I think you're right. We'd be better off with a video technician with a PDF of the rulebook than the referees try to operate the video. But just to move on from VAR, because we kind of are running out of time. There was some other games at the weekend in the Cup. There was 2 kind of upsets. I'm just going to brush over them a little bit. Inverness, who had actually got through on a technicality because Queen's Park had fielded an ineligible player, then went to Livingston and won 3-0 at Livingston after getting through on a technicality, which was pretty wild as a result, if you ask me. And then Rafe Rovers, easy for you to say, upset Motherwell. I don't know if you call it an upset, because Rafe Rovers are in pretty good form and Motherwell are frankly rank. And the upshot of that game, and interestingly, Partick Thistle, which was a little more surprising, was that Jamie Hamill of Motherwell and Ian McCall were both sacked like within an hour or 2 of the game being finished. They didn't even get to do their media duties. Ian McCall did, but Jamie Hamill didn't. He was at the stadium as well, which we saw happen to Jim Goodwin 2 weeks ago as well. Do we think that's okay for like chairman to do that, to be at the game and with a P45 before like the team's even backing the coach? Is that the right thing to do? What do you reckon, Anthony?
I have issue with this because obviously Motherwell's form has been dreadful for a very long time. I think I had a look. They won 6 or 7 games last season. For the whole of 2022, the whole calendar year, they won 7 games. It's just, it's terrible. Yeah. It's dreadful. So, I mean, it's not like it was a massive shock. And all right, Raith Rovers beat them on the weekend. But what's the incoming manager supposed to do? Like, the transfer window's shut. You've got somebody come in, you're hoping for a new manager bounce to get you out the proverbial crapper to get you off bottom of the table. It's going to be a real crapshoot between them and Dundee United, because they're doing their darndest to shoot themselves in the foot as well. They let Tony Watt go. They let their other centre forward, Nicky Clark, go as well to opposition teams in the same league. So, don't talk about making it hard for yourself. But I think Motherwell are in danger. I really think they are going to go down. They are showing absolutely no signs at the moment. And if something happens to Kevin Van de Veen, they're finished. He is literally the talisman. He's the one guy that he almost dug them out a hole against Raith Rovers. But something happens to him, they're done. And I can't see a Yogi Hughes or whoever gets the job, because there's going to be somebody like that, how they're going to dig them out a hole now to the end of the season. And the only way it's going to happen is if another team is worse. And I must admit, Dundee United vs Kilmarnock, that was dour watching. I watched the 5 minutes of highlights. Highlights is a very, very kind description for that, because that was a tough watch.
Paul, what do you reckon about these managers getting sacked at the end of games? Is it etiquette? Is it poor?
It's a bit knee-jerk. Like, it's just, we're in a knee-jerk world. That everything's knee-jerk. Everything's, instant reaction, social media, etc., etc. I think, you can just a little bit of class. Just let them see their media duties out and have a sit down with them in the morning and say, look, it's done. This whole, I haven't seen the footage actually of Goodwin, but I heard that it was, real awkward as he was sort of exiting the pitch and
Jim Goodwin, all of
that, and he pretty much knew he was going. I think football monitoring boards should be a little bit stand by the courage of your own convictions. At the end of the day, you're appointing these people. You must be having regular sit downs with these managers and management teams and sort of tracking progress and sort of having a bit of dialogue. And surely there's some discussion on an ongoing basis about what is and isn't going to be acceptable and roughly where that line in the sand is. So I don't think you need to. I don't think there's. I don't know. I'm not sure there was, a baying crowd outside these grounds expecting the manager to be gone immediately on the back of a poor cup result. I just think it could be done the next day.
On the Jim Goodwin one though, he should have went. He should have
gone long before then, to be honest. But
yeah, the Darvel result should have been the end of him there. Like, I'm not saying immediately after that, but that week he should have went, because the Hibs game he was on a high into nothing. He was on a high into nothing. It's as simple as that. So,
and yeah, look, if you once you back him after Darvel, then why are you rushing it the 10 minutes after he's lost the game? Like, you've made that poor decision. You know, you're now then trying to cover yourself a bit by immediately getting him out the door. So there's a bit of PR and a bit of spin there. You're absolutely spot on. Nobody should have survived that Darvel result. And look, the seeds for his demise were, I think, that game against us when he refused to come and try and have a go at home, or at least put up some kind of attempt to get the points, and just try to sit in and hope he could make something on the break or get a draw at best. So it's a weird one, that, because he did a good job at St Mirren, and got some good results and had them playing above themselves. And then he goes to Pittodrie, where obviously there's been problems there for years. It's my neck of the woods, so I've seen a lot of that up close. But Aberdeen fans are absolutely sick and embarrassed about what's going on there. And I think Cormac's become like a bit of a false dawn. He came in and there was cash, but then there was also like naming training grounds after himself. And is he there for the right reasons? There's a bit of ego about the guy. So we could probably talk about other teams in the leagues, disasters for hours. But like Aberdeen, it sounds like there's a heavy rumour. It looks like Lenny might end up at Aberdeen, and they're waiting for this April thing to pass for the tax year so that they can appoint him. Be interested to see if that happens. There's not a lot of love for either Celtic or Rangers up there, so we were probably the more tolerable of the two, going back a number of years for a number of reasons. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. Aberdeen's a bit of a poison chalice, if you ask me.
Well, I have to say, Jim Goodwin staying in after Darvel was, I was looking forward. I actually went out my way to find that Aberdeen Hibs game to watch it. So it did create a bit of box office, whereas if it was Barry Robson then as the caretaker, I probably wouldn't have bothered. But on the kind of subject of shambolic SPFL teams, we've got the Scottish Cup round draw, quarter-final draw tonight, and there will be 4 non-Premiership teams out of the 8. So half of the teams will be Premiership, half non. So we've got us, Sevco, Hearts, so totally drawn a blank, and I've not got my run sheet. Kilmarnock are the other top flight team. Then you've got Inverness Cally Thistle, who knocked out Livy. You've got Wraith Rovers, Ayr United, and one of Darvel or Falkirk. So some of the comments coming in here, I'll say some of the comments, it's Michael Ross twice, I've just noticed. Draw later today, and he wants Sevco at Celtic Park. And I have to confess, before I came on tonight, and I was thinking about this as a topic of discussion, I was actually thinking I would like to get them at this moment as well. What do you guys reckon? Who do you want in the next round?
I'm not bothered. I take it as it comes. Obviously, you want a home tie. I mean, I think that's the critical thing here, because there's still a few extra tough parts in the competition, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. So Kilmarnock,
yeah.
So you don't really want to be playing in one of those, and you probably don't want to be going to Mordor if you can help it. But if you have to, so be it. But I mean, I don't think Celtic should be fearing anybody. So bring it on. I'd have a preference, whatever. But as long as it's not on a plastic part, that's my one caveat.
Paul?
Similarly, I was gonna Anthony beat me to it in terms of, I was gonna say just a home tie. Yeah. Look, I don't know. Like I'm saying, I couldn't care less really. You avoid the plastic. Sod's lost. I would say if you're a skeptic, you're probably going to have an away tie at either Killie or Hearts. Would be typical, I would expect. But look, on form, we should be giving anyone a bit of a run. So yeah, I'm not overly concerned. We'll see.
I think with the romance of the cup, we could expect, if Darvel win tonight, we could expect to be seeing them at Celtic Park. That'd be
great. I guess the alternative is they get to pull a home tie, and then presumably it would need to be moved somewhere. But it's still, it probably wouldn't. Well, they might swap it to us just for the cash, I guess. But or they might find somewhere a little bit closer to home that'll get a biggish crowd, but not on our own park. So Yeah,
which would be Kilmarnock on the plastic pitch.
That's what, yeah. So yeah, if it's Darvel, it's great for it is great for the sort of romance of the cup. But yeah, obviously, I wouldn't expect another Aberdeen result on that one.
Yeah. We just like, I don't know about you guys, but I just love having that cup final at the end of the season, when whether you've won or lost the league, just having that cup final as your kind of final party of the season is always really good. Mahesh is asking in the comments if it's seeded. There's not in the Scottish Cup. No, there's no seeding at any stage as far as I'm aware, unless it's in the earlier rounds that don't involve the top flight teams. I believe there is some seeding at some point in the League Cup, but I'm not 100% in that one, so I'd need to kind of have a think.
I think the League Cup, I think teams that are in Europe get a pass.
Get a pass.
Is that a group thing? Is that a group thing?
They do groups at the start, yeah.
The groups are seeded.
Yeah.
The groups are definitely seeded. I know that, but I don't know. Yeah, you're right. I don't know about the knockout, because there's only 4 rounds to get to the League Cup final now. And because of the World Cup, we're playing it in February. But I quite liked it being in November, and I hope it's back there next year, because it is good to have that kind of first half of the season trophy. Anyway, we're over an hour now, so I'm going to wrap up. I've got a couple of messages welcoming you guys on. One from John G. Great to have you guys, part of CDU. And from Jared, I'm assuming is listening. Welcome, Paul and Anthony. So hope you enjoyed your first show, guys. If you'd like to have any farewell messages, tell us what you've got plans for this week. Any good shows you're watching on Netflix? What's happening, Anthony?
I've just got 2 final thoughts just very quickly. One, if you haven't watched it already, there's a good video on Celtic TV between Greg Taylor and Alistair Johnston doing Scottish sayings. So it's from Burns Supper week, so you can look it up. It's really, really good laugh. It goes for about 10 minutes, and they slag off some of their teammates, and that's quite funny and a really good watch. And the other thing is sectarian scumbag Kyle Lafferty has left the SPFL. He's off to Linfield.
Saw that.
The Daily Ranger has said it was a no-brainer. I think they've got the no-brain part right. And good riddance to bad rubbish.
Yep. Paul?
Yeah, not much to add, to be honest. Thank you for having me in the first show. Good to be on, and yeah, looking forward to the weekend and bit of no rugby this weekend, so just stick to footy this weekend. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Oh yeah, Scotland's charging up for the Grand Slam, right? It's Scotland versus Ireland.
Well,
Russell.
Look, I've watched Scottish rugby for a long time, and was it something like 27 years since we won the first 2 matches in the tournament? So it wasn't even the Six Nations the last time we won the first 2 matches.
That's right.
Yeah. The natural Scottish excitement will have us winning the Grand Slam, and I must admit it did briefly cross my mind, but I then watched the Ireland-France game and thought both of those teams could give us a doing. So we'll wait and see. You can probably expect us to beat France and then trip ourselves up on Italy potentially. So
yeah, when I seen with 135-7, I was like, oh, I thought we were playing Italy later, and then it's Wales. I was like, all right, okay. But yeah, I think last year Ireland and France were better. I think we'll probably finish behind them again. One final thing from me is that if anyone may or may not have seen it last night / this morning, Kansas City Chiefs won the Super Bowl on a dodgy refereeing decision. So it's not just Scottish football. Check it out if you want. But other than that, take care. Good night. Good morning, wherever you're listening from. Good afternoon. Hail, hail, and we'll see you next week.
Hail, hail.
Hail, hail.